Yam Brahma Varnendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Daboy Vedai Sangha Pada Kramo Upanishadoy Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyana Vashtita Tadgatena Manasha Pashanti Yam Yogino Yashantum Navidduhu Sura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Our eternal salutations to that one who is the truth of life and existence, and whom the saints and sages call by various names. Our eternal salutations to that one whose glories are sung in the various hymns of the different religious scriptures of the world, but whose infinite and undying grandeur no mortal mind can comprehend. Our eternal salutations to that one upon whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their hearts, realizing an ineffable presence in their deepest contemplations. May he prompt our minds toward the path of truth and righteousness. May she reveal herself into our souls and dispel the gloom of death, fear, doubt, and darkness. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. May Brahman protect us on all three worlds, all three levels of our existence, that is, on the gross external world, on the subtle internal world, basically of our mind, and of the causal world or transcendent world, which is beyond name and form, which consists of everything from Mahat and Avyakta, the unmanifested, all the way up to the indivisible Brahman itself, as we just chanted. And may Brahman also sustain us. That means, how does Brahman sustain us? With these dharmic teachings about Brahman. We chanted this morning out of the Vivikachudamani, Om Shuttehe Shattagunam Vidyan Mananam Mananadapi Nididhyasam Lakshagunam Anantam Nirvikalpakam. Some of those words ring bells deep within us, like Nirvikalpa. We all know that as the highest state of awareness, samadhi, or non-dual existence. But also key words in that sloka are mananam mananadapi nididhyasam. That is, shrutehe shatagunam mananadapi nididhyasam. So that's shruti, to hear, manana, to roll it around in your mind for a good long period of time, and then nididhyasa, to actually realize it. And that's the three proofs of truth for the enthusiastic aspirant after Vedic wisdom and ultimately leading to enlightenment. Knowledge has to end somewhere, and according to Krishna and the Gita, it ends in truth. If it's true knowledge, it'll end in truth. If it's false knowledge, mithya gyan, it's called mithya gyan, then it leads you back to the world of suffering, back to the world of dualities, or worse than dualities like pleasure and pain and life and death, to the world of fragmentation, scattered mind, where there is no peace of mind. And we know that Holy Mother said you need peace of mind first and foremost. That would be even to enter into your daily work, what to speak of enter into meditation or enter into the realm of the gods and goddesses or the saints and seers and sages. peace of mind is going to be a major requisite. So she said, never lose your peace of mind for any reason whatsoever. You'll have to sacrifice everything else for that in order to keep that. Peace of mind, you could say, is sattva, or pure sattva, as Shankara makes the distinction between regular sattva, which is just your basic, healthy, happy life, and pure sattva, which is a desire for scriptures, desire to study like we're doing today in the Svetashvatara Upanisad and like we did yesterday, and the desire to meditate on those truths. You get my gist, Shruti, Mananam, and then finally you work it into your life, Nidijasa. You hear, and then you contemplate it, roll it over and over in your mind. You're not a wine taster rolling tongue over your tongue, or rolling wine over your tongue. That's for worldly preoccupations, but this sort of, metaphorically speaking, you have to do that kind of thing as if the mind is the tongue, and the scriptures are a great, rare vintage of wisdom that you don't get to hear that often. You don't get to, as I said yesterday, it's not spoken in households most often, not unless they're purposefully dharmic households, which we'd like to see more of. And you don't hear it at school and in college courses, and you're not going to learn it as you grow up through elementary and high school, and you don't hear it from your elders in this day and time, unless, of course, you're born in a country that has had it in its genealogy and its samskaras and its history for time out of mind for millennia, like, say, India, Mother India. So where do you hear this rare thing? You have to go seeking holy company. Satsangatve, and then nirmohatve, and so forth. That is, you get holy company, and that gets rid of your moha, makes you nirmohatvam, free of delusion. And when you get free of delusion, then nishchali, you get resolve, steadiness. You're resolved in the truth. You don't have any more doubts. And then you get jivan mukti in this life. You become a jivan mukta, that is, living, liberated soul, that nothing can nothing can fend away. See, nothing. You're impervious to all sorts of insinuations of Maya that are there in daily life. And so that's what happens in a nutshell when you chant something like Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, or when you come seeking holy company and sit in the Sangha with a certain mind frame. Things like sleepiness and restlessness and attachment and attraction and aversion go away, and you begin to feel a sort of subtle bliss occupying your heart and mind. That's that peace of mind. And then that's going to be a signal that truth and bliss are coming. See, peace is always a herald to bliss. And especially if it's abiding, as it lasts a long time. The happiness that just comes and goes, that's suspect. Krishna says that in the Gita, what is sweet in the beginning turns sour later. That you want to avoid. But what is sour in the beginning that turns sweet later, that you want to take to yourself. So usually we think of studying of scriptures and having to sit quietly in meditation and still the active mind and those kinds of things as sour in the beginning. But with long-standing perseverance, which is one of Holy Mother's favorite qualities, those things start to turn very sweet, and that's that peace-bliss combination that leaves you well situated in life for any kind of eventuality, that is, any kind of trial or tribulation, or what goes on around you in the collective consciousness. Many of the components of that collective consciousness not being in peace, then you're impervious to that. You gain a kind of shield against that. And that's why we take teachings like Six Treasures and Six Divine Powers of God, which is coming from this sloka that we ended yesterday. Remember, we managed to work our way through 8 slokas 7 slokas of the 4th chapter of the Svetashvatara Upanisad. Svetashvatara was this great rishi who passed his wisdom on. He was probably more recent of the ancient rishis, I don't know, 4,000 years prior to Christ. That's recent for Indian rishis. They stretch back much earlier to the very early great souls, Vedic rishis. So Svetashvatara was more contemporary as rishis go, so Upanishad is one of the more recent ones in history. It's still quite ancient, of course, but it shows when you have slokas like we read yesterday. Brahman is the fire, Brahman is the moon, Brahman is the woman, the youth, Brahman is the old man tottering along on his staff, Brahman is the dark blue butterfly, Brahman is the green parrot with red eyes. Then you're starting to get into something very beautiful and deep and poetic, and the thoughts of a more contemporary thinker. He'd also be called a non-thinker. That's what Lex told me early. He said, I wrote a poem for him, and he said, oh, that's some of the best Vedantic thinking in that poem, or non-thinking, depending on how you put it. So you have to really stop the mind from thinking in order to get away from conventional thought, because that collective consciousness out there is influencing you. All the current trends, see all the latest scientific discoveries, all the new ways how to take care of your skin. You'll see skincare products they sent me yesterday on my computer. One of my students sent me, and I wrote back and they said, someone's using your address. I know you wouldn't be sending your guru advertisements about skincare. And she wrote back and said, yeah, someone's got a hold of my user. So I said, I didn't think that was you, unless you were kidding me. So all of those things that are a part of the eclectic mind that are trying to seep in, or mayic, they're trying to seep in, and you have this, hopefully your impervious shield up there of mother wisdom, dharma, that protects you, that sustains you. And then you can look out and not just when you see a butterfly or a green parrot with red eyes and say, oh, that's pretty, how nice. You could say, wow, that's a manifestation of Brahman, how precious, see how rare. What a special moment this is to be beholding that. And you have this sort of what they used to call zest for life, but that's been amplified too. It's not just the usual zest for life. You see people jumping into life foolish-minded, bubble-headed, you see. It's, this is my oyster, this world. I can just have fun here, you see. And later on they find out it comes with a price, you see. And maybe that price is more than the price of, than the cost of pleasure that they bought with it. So that's why we sang yesterday that song by Ram Prasad, Abai Padipran Shopechi Amiyar ki jamir bayre kechi. I've purchased the name of Mother Durga in the marketplace of the world, and I sold it for the cost of my body. I gave my body away, and then to the marketplace of the world, and then the world gave me back what I wanted, the name of Kali, and now I just chant that. And I keep her tied to the tuft of my hair, so she'll always be close to my mind. She'll always be on my mind, he says humorously, as a sort of aside. So that kind of divine remembrance is very highly coveted by the wise. They want to keep Brahman always on their mind. They want to keep Ishvara and Ishvari always on the mind. And so these divine powers. So with those slokas, we approach sloka 7, and where it said, there are two birds of the beautiful plumage sitting in the same tree, but one eats the fruits and one doesn't. One just sits in the sun. And the one that eats the fruit eats sweet and sour fruits and gets healthy and sick. And so it keeps looking up to this other bird that's just completely actionless and sitting noble in the sunlight of its own awareness. You see. And then pretty soon gives up eating good and bad, that is virtue, vice. Except, because of Mananam, Shruti, Mananam, and Nidijasa, you see, it hears the truth and then it considers it, and finally it decides it wants to work it into its life, and it joins that upper bird. So that was all the analogy, famous metaphor really from the Upanishads. It's probably the most famous metaphor is the snake and the rope. Vedanta, if you go into the Vedantic circle, you immediately hear that. I heard actually a funny joke about that. Somebody told me that he met a friend who was really totally freaked out. And he said, yes, I was walking in the twilight, you see, and I saw a snake. And, I didn't know it was a rope. So I picked up a stick to beat that snake that was in the rope. And to my surprise, the stick turned out to be the snake. So you never know where Maya is going to come from, you see. So you can take these famous analogies, like say the late and great John Dobson did, talking about the teachings on Avarana and Vikshepa Shakti. He's a great sidewalk astronomer in San Francisco here. A lot of you probably knew about him, and used to attend Jaima music concerts and really supported us. And great thinker and Vedantist who was a monk for many years down at the LA Center, Vedanta Center, and he passed away. So we did a tribute to him in our recent newsletter, which is coming out any day now, which is being worked on. But he was one that was always going around talking about how they always teach Avarana and Vikshepa Shakti in Vedanta. They always talk about the veiling and the distorting power. But there's another Shakti out there called Prakasha Shakti. That's revelatory power. So nobody ever talks about that. So he was one of those that would bring out certain facets of the hidden facets of the Vedanta. So because Vedanta is the water, the flowers, not the weeds kind of philosophy. So why are we always talking about covering and distorting power? Why don't we talk about the revelatory power that's in Maya? And a lot of people can identify with that, and they react to it positively because they feel that there must be something more to this world than just illusion. As one young lady asked me yesterday, in fact, a young Vedanta student said, I was talking about the world and what Maya meant. How does Maya really mean outright illusion? And I said, no, Swami Vivekananda came and corrected that false description of Maya. People were calling it illusion. And he called it a statement of fact, that it's as real as long as you behold it, but then it will go away, so you can't call it real. And so Shankara says you can't call it real, nor can you call it unreal, nor you can call it a combination of real and unreal. It's just unfigurable. So don't try and figure it. So Sri Ramakrishna said, study Maya from a distance, never study it up close. Never try and get into it. Because once you get into it and try and study it, say like, the atomic particle. See, let's get in and study that. Or deep space, let's study that. As soon as you get into it and try and take that approach, you're considering it to be real. It never occurred to you that the atomic particle is changing at a billionth of a second and the Saturn's rings change all the time. And you're trying to study it and pinpoint it in Maya, so you're thinking it to be real, you're starting off on the wrong footing. You should have considered it to be an illusion, illusory by nature, empty by nature in the first place, and watched it from a distance. And kept your own vantage point, sacrosanct, see. Not give yourself away to matter. Because look what happens after several generations of that kind of study. See, God is forgotten, truth is forgotten, higher wisdom is sacrificed, and now you're just running a bunch of passageways in the ordinary mind and getting stuck in them. Like water flows along the same groove, you see, till it becomes stagnant. So with that kind of turn of mind, certain people will bring out these certain teachings. Well, there's a revelatory power in everything you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. A revelatory power. You're just not finding it. You're just succumbing to the veiling power and the distorting power. See? Oh, I'll just accept it at face value. So then you're saying it's real, you see. Well, the appearance is real. And then so that's half of the quotient of Maya. No, it's not real. But then you say, look at it and you say, well, actually if I look at it deeper with an electron microscope, then it shows itself up to be unreal and changing. So then you conclude it's unreal. And then you start calling it illusion, and you've missed the point too, you see. It's a statement of fact as long as you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell it, but your senses are limited. So you're going to have to go the full distance and say it's both real and unreal. And then a combination of both. And it's constantly changing. And that's why Ramakrishna said, gave that famous story of the 5 blind men and the elephant. They all touch different parts of the elephant, and they conclude the elephant's a rope because one touched the tail. No, it's a tree trunk, you see, because one touched the leg. It seems like a big boulder to me. See, and they're all blind. Or the chameleon in the woods. One fella comes out and talks to his friends. I saw a strange animal in the woods. It was like yellow in that certain tree. No, I've seen there. I've been there and seen that tree. That's really red. It's not yellow. And they argue about the color of the chameleon. It's exactly what's happening with people making premature, or in this case, immature conclusions about the world of Maya. It's constantly changing. It's going to throw up every variation it possibly can in front of you. So you have to be steady. That's this mudra from Shiva. Chidananda Rupaha Shivaham Shivaham. Chidananda, I am the bliss of consciousness. Shivaham Shivaham, I am Shiva, I am the unchanging one. I am the Atman. And Maya resides inside of me like poison in a snake, but I never die from it. I never succumb to it. And so revelatory power is there. It's not, revelatory power might not give you what you're looking for. Sattva never does. Balance. You have to go beyond balance too. It has to be a transcendental position that you reach. That's why he ends the sloka nirvikalpakam. First Shruti, then Manana, then Nididhyasana, but it has to end in nirvikalpakam. It has to end in nirvana. Say the saints who have experienced nirvana. So you might want to take their word for it, since they're the experts in the field. Ramakrishna used to say, you have an illness, go to a doctor. Have a court case, go to a lawyer. See? Want to buy eggplants? Go to the marketplace. See? But if you want to know about God, where are you going to go? To a lawyer, to a doctor, to a scientist? Oh, you're going to have to go to a seer of truth. Or a sage, or at least a saint. A saint has that faith in God that comes from the heart. So the heart chakra has opened. So whether you talk about it in terms of metaphorically, like 2 birds in a tree, or whether you take it deeper into actual study of philosophy, and how Maya shifts all the time, and how to practice witness consciousness in order to get to a higher state of consciousness. The Upanishads give you all those perspectives and the methods. But you would probably say Upanishad isn't much for method, because they figure you've already practiced the method and you've found the method wanting. So you like japa, right? You've done the mantra and you found it wanting. It didn't lead you to the goal. It was a means to the end, but it didn't actually get you into nirvana. So Holy Mother, who is perfect at japa practice, Sri Sharda Devi, she said, japa is a practice, it's not an end in itself. But it purifies the mind so that the mind can see Brahman. So the mind will become transparent and Brahman will show up as the underlying essence of the mind and heart, you see, and matter, underlying essence of everything. You just can't see it because the mind's in the way, clouding things up. So therefore you use japa to practice, and the practice then leaves you in a pure state, and then wait for a while in that pure state. Ramakrishna used to say, to get butter you have to churn milk vigorously. But after you churn it, butter's not there yet. You have to put it in a very quiet place for a while, and then the butter floats to the surface, the cream, and you coagulate that and you've got your butter. So he's talking about meditative practice, not teaching about farming. Go to a farmer for that. He's using it metaphorically to tell you, that after you churn, that's sadhana, vigorously with this wisdom, which is the churning pole, you see, then sit in a quiet place and wait for that essence to rise up from your mind that you just churned. See? Then when you see that essence, gather it together, you see. It's separate from the 2%. You see. Now you've got the essence, and then you've got the leftover thin liquid, you see. That's the world, but the butter is the essence. It was in the world all the time. So that's what revelatory power is like, you see. It's there, Maya's pointing to it all the time, but you're succumbing to the veiling power and the distorting power of Maya. You prefer that for some strange reason, rather than the revelatory power. So that churning takes a little effort, takes a little brawn, takes a little muscle, and so forth. So you're going to have to, in order to get that butter of non-dual essence, you're going to have to strive. Seeking and striving is key to Advaita Vedanta. I say that to all of those watching, live streaming too, that we don't believe that Advaita Vedanta is just a mere pronunciation, I am Brahman, or I am Shiva, or I am that, or who am I? That's not enough. You see, you have to prove it to yourself through rigorous spiritual practices. That's the proving ground, sadhana. Otherwise you're always in doubt. Am I really Brahman? Sometimes I don't seem to be Brahman. Sometimes I seem to be more worldly. Sometimes I seem to be confused. Sometimes I seem to be suffering from death and disease, you see, as Maya changes all around me. And so to really make yourself impervious to change, changeless, immutable, then you're going to have to prove it to yourself through your own spiritual self-effort. So my whole point is that the Upanishads don't contain a lot of method. You're not going to look through the pages and say, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? They figure you already heard the truth, Shruti, meditated on it, Manana, and you're at a place where you nididhyasana, you want to work it into your life, you want to realize it. So now they come along and give you the conclusion of things, you see. And they give you the conclusions of things on the level of qualified non-duality and non-duality, because few of us can jump straight to the non-dual position and just live there. It'd be like living at the ocean for months and all of a sudden going to the top of Everest and trying to camp out. See, you're not even acclimatized to elevation yet. So spiritual elevation has to be, you have to acclimatize to it. It's rarefied air. So that's non-duality. So a lot of these teachings that are metaphorical, poetic, and qualified are teachings that help you acclimatize to a higher position. Like this one we're on now, which is 8. Of what avail are the scriptures to that one who does not know the indestructible, highest ethereal being, in whom the gods and the Vedas reside? Only those who know that are satisfied. Only those who know that, with a capital T, are satisfied. So scriptures, gods and goddesses, as we were talking about recently and so forth, all reside within you. All of them reside within Brahman, and Brahman is the only thing that satisfies. That, tat tvamasi, that thou art. That kind of non-dual wisdom is the only thing that's going to really fulfill you. And so, in order to know the indestructible, you make your way through that one who has all the clues and powers. So this chart, we can call it forward for a minute, and you can see around Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's birthday, which we just celebrated last night with a very beautiful puja, we see that his picture graces, 2 of his pictures actually grace this chart. In the first part of that chart, we can open it up with this saying by the father of Vedanta, Vedavyas. As the web comes out of a spider, as sparks come out of fire, so this whole universe proceeds from the beloved goddess, the primal force of existence. We salute her, the Mahashakti, within whose Mayic power this whole universe, moving and unmoving, is projected, sustained, and withdrawn. We salute her, the primal power, within who the whole universe is projected, sustained, and withdrawn. They sing like that quite often too. Namaste Sharanye Shive Sanukampe Namaste Jagadvyapike Vishwarupe Namaste Jagadvandya Padaravinde Namaste Jagatarini Trayedurge Namaste Jagachinja Manaswarupe Namaste Mahayogini, and so forth and so on. Namaste, salutations again and again to the Mahayogini, the great mother, to the great Tarini, the mother who is all compassion, to the one who is the refuge of all beings, to the one who is Shiva's consort, and so forth and so on. Everything they can think about mother, they'll present to you in one way or another, to try and impress upon you the underlying importance of finding that hidden oil in the sesame seed, see, that hidden fire and wood. Everything that you need the revelatory power for, to bring out the essence, because essence is always covered in form. The world is created out of chaos. I think that's one thing in which Vedanta and science could agree on. Either it's the Big Bang, of course that's just the physical world, or it's the disequilibrium of the gunas. See, the gunas were nice and balanced and weren't insinuating themselves. Then all of a sudden, the possibility of slothfulness, restlessness, and balance comes. Why do I need that choice? You say, who's in charge of this universe, right? Somebody complained at me yesterday, you see. There must be somebody that I can blame for all this mess, besides myself. And so there it is, you see, the natural inclination of things to break into many parts. I was happy in homogeneous awareness, thank you. I didn't need the gunas to come spilling out so that I had a choice between being lazy, restless, or balanced. What a drag, you see. I didn't want, balance would be okay. I'd need to get to transcendence, maybe I'd realize that, but I have to, in the meantime, put up with slothfulness and restlessness? What nonsense is that for the noble Atman, you see, who is always one and unchanging, in whom the Maya cannot penetrate, see, who is impervious to change. Why should I have to put up with that? So I think I'll shift things around here. If Maya's good at shifting things, I think I'll do some shifting of my own. See, Maya's not the only shifty one. I'll outshift her. In fact, I'll sift her. Sift her out of the picture. So whether you sing it or whether you say it, that import of these divine powers as helpers. So when Christendom tells you, you get to the Father through the Son, this is what they're talking about, really. There are divine powers, heavenly powers, trans-heavenly powers even, that are in the picture, and if they're a part of the revelatory power called Prakasha Shakti, why are you running after other kinds of problematic things, you see? I mean, you're running after illusory things and suffering the effects of them when you could be just pursuing these things like Shri. Somebody asked me yesterday, what does Shri mean? At satsang, or day before yesterday. And I said, this actually has many meanings, like most Sanskrit words, but the first is a sort of appellation of respect or reverence that you put towards someone who's a revered person, Sri Aurobindo, or Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So a little bit like Sir, if you rearrange the R and the I, but Sri has a more reverent connotation to it than just respect. So, but Sri also means the goddess of wealth. Her name is Sri. Padmini, or Lakshmi. They call her by a different name. Kamala. She is her name. She's the goddess of wealth. So necessarily then, as one of the powers, it would be unlimited abundance. It's one of the six great treasures that Sri Ramakrishna talked about. Unlimited abundance. Then there's also Bala, magnificent glory. There's also Aishvarya, irresistible strength. Sometimes they even call that lordship, because a certain soul becomes so capable at operating the powers of the cosmic process that they can take over whole heavenly worlds, and then they can practice lordship of all these beings. Sort of like the parents of a large household, you see, or something. They have older children, middle children, younger children, dogs, cats, birds, garden full of plants and trees. So they're lord over that whole little realm, you see. So magnify that much over, and you'll find these gods have Aishvarya, lordship, or irresistible strength. Then Vijnana is there, penetrating wisdom. That's one of the great treasures that the seers seek after. And Tyaga, renunciation. You always find that these teachings will give you a higher perspective to operate from. Like, for instance, how can I put natural renunciation together with unlimited abundance? I've got all this unlimited abundance, but I shouldn't own it, is sort of what they're saying, you see. I shouldn't possess it. I shouldn't call it mine. It's mine, but I shouldn't call it mine, because that leads to problems. Ownership is a problem. Custodianship, not so much, you see. Because, why? Because Aishvarya is custodianship. See, I'm going to practice lordship over all these beings that are my minions, see. But I'm going to make sure I do that without the least amount of attachment, see. So you see how you can take these great teachings and principles, and where they seem contradictory, put them in perfect order with one another, so that you have a picture of what he is like, what she is like. You have the perfect picture of Ishvara and Ishvari, the perfect soul, like a Vivekananda, and Nitya Siddha, Ramakrishna called him. He's the perfect soul, eternally perfect. You'd probably tend to be that way if you sat for meditation for 700 years at a time, outside the body, like he does. He leaves the body, he doesn't go into a slothful state, you see, and come out upside down, being spanked on the butt by a doctor with your mantra being wah, 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 you see. He didn't spend his time outside the body in a comatose state, in an unconscious condition. He went straight into meditation from death, because death was a meditation to him. He used to tell us, sit, now give up the body, give up the breath, give up thoughts. And it's classic meditation. I showed it to you yesterday in the Dissolving the Mind Stream chart, right? Which is the name of our new book, just available. No. See, Dissolving the Mind Stream, bit by bit, back inside. From Deha to Indriya, from Indriya to subtle Indriyas, into the prana, from prana into manas, manas into buddhi. Those are Sanskrit words, but basically it's just body, body, elements, senses, and mind, and intellect, and withdraw them back into each other, because each came out of the other. They spilled out in quintuplications, didn't they? Fives. 5 senses, 5 elements, 5-fold mind, so forth. 5 pranas, 5 forms of prana. So take them back in, 5 at a time, or 1 at a time, and then by 5s. And dissolve them back into your own mind, where they came from. And then you're a master of inner and outer, you see. Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayan San Matram Anandaganam Vibhavayan Samahita San Bahir Antaram Va. Bahir, the outer, Antaram, the inner. Why, just like I had 3 choices of gunas, why do I have to worry about outer and inner? not a drag. I should instead render them into one indivisible state and meditate on that state and pass my time contentedly and be free and give up thinking about outer and inner. You know, first I had to practice a little discrimination to sift the wheat from the chaff. All right, that's a given. That's even in the Upanishads as a method. If they give you any method, it's viveka and vairagya. See, those are the first two jewels of the treasure. So you separate the wheat from the chaff, and then you know what's outer and what's inner. But then you see that the outer has come from the inner. And then you say, well, they must be the same thing. In other words, the outer is made of solid objects, and the inner is made of thought. Objects came from thought. Duh. I just stumbled upon the Prakasha Shakti. Let's see. And she just told me something. Now I have to take it seriously, meditate on it. So, antaramva, kalam yetaha sati karma bande. Now pass my time contentedly, destroy my karmas, and be free. Based on that knowledge. Knowledge is what you do to get, what you attain in order to get rid of ignorance. Nahi gyanena sudrishyam pavitram miha vidyate. The greatest purifier in all the worlds is knowledge. That gets rid of your ignorance. So once you have knowledge, you must affirm that knowledge is mine. That knowledge is true. I've tested it. The seers have tested it. I've run it by my guru. I've looked at it in the scriptures. Jesus said it. So there's no reason to doubt it anymore. Now let's make it my own. See? I've been playing around with mine all the time, haven't I? Be my Valentine yesterday. People were sending them left and right. Be mine. Did you ever turn to your Atman and say, be mine? Or did you ever say, turn to that inner wisdom that you still have some doubt about and say, be mine. Be my Valentine, Mother of Wisdom. I'm courting you. See? Send her a note. Dear Mother, I really love your wisdom. Signed, your son out here in Maya in confusion. See? And then have her deliver you a Valentine in return, in the shape of a heart, of course. At least they got that right. See? So, court that mother wisdom and make it your own. And what I'm saying is stand up and affirm it as your own. Don't just let it kind of hang out in the periphery of your mind as something that could be your own, or maybe it's not my own. We just said, Shruti, hear, Manana, meditate it, roll it in your mind, and Nididhyasana, realize it. How come I never get to that third step? See, I always court it, but I never marry her. See. So these six, and the sixth one is Tejas, awesome splendor. It's a light. In fact, Tejas is what happens at the very end of the Kundalini process. You eat food, you say your mantra over it, you do your spiritual practices, and all the time the energy is in you is changing. This is real energy work, as we were talking about this morning after meditation. That's real energy work, not the body work. That happens to do with things that shouldn't be there in the first place. But this real energy work of Kundalini, chakra to chakra, is very profound. And so as it rises up the spine, based on eating good food and saying the mantra over it, purifying it, and then taking the remainder of that energy and sublimating it by practice. That is, it's a very subtle thing that can't really be seen, hard to explain it too, but by eating good food and meditating and doing the mantra practice, what you're doing is sublimating the energy. It's happening. What you're doing is changing your mind's way of thinking, and that it secretes an unseen essence, see, that will help this energy refine more and more. So you can't see it happening, but you can feel it over time if you persist. And so that turns into what's called ojas, and ojas turns into tejas. And that's what you see when you see this awesome splendor of a Buddha or a Krishna and so forth. This tejas has been fully realized, and the whole process has been a process of sublimation that's culminated in enlightenment. These chakras are open, not just the heart, but you see people sometimes with heart chakra openings, but very rarely do you see people with the 5th, 6th, and 7th chakras open, like in the case of Sri Ramakrishna. Now let's look at the 6 powers of God. You are the first one. This is really one of my favorite teachings. I like this chart very much, even though it's an old one, a war horse, and we show it a lot. Nonetheless, it shows you the powers of God are living beings, are powers of God. If they started looking at themselves like that, it would be a much better place to live, wouldn't it? I mean, much higher would be to look at yourself as Atman, but who can do that? Again, you say it, you think about it, but you can't quite realize it, you see. So maybe it would be good to not set your sights so high yet. Just know that you're the Atman based on what the seers have told you. But maybe I should set my sights on telling myself, I'm one of the powers of God. I'm one of his arms, or I'm one of the hairs on his arms, depending on how much credit you give yourself. See? One of his toes. See? I'm aspiring to be, his right hand. See, I'm going to sit near the right hand side of my Lord. So, in the meantime, they tell you this is one of the powers of God. You yourself are that. And this quote that Master says, the jiva, that's the embodied being, is at first remains in a state of ignorance. He is not conscious of God, but of multiplicity. Then he becomes conscious that God dwells in all beings. It's better if you find it first in yourself, and then you can see it in others, but quite often it's the case that you start seeing it in others, like in your guru, or in an avatar, or maybe even in a great teacher or a parent, somebody that you really admire, and you see good qualities there, so you see at least aspects of God shining through them. It might be mixed with other things in the case of ordinary human beings in the world, but you'll have to go into holy company to see a greater manifestation of that power in beings, and then you'll know more and more that it exists and that it can be attained. That's called exemplar. In Vedanta, we're not so enamored of the thought of Savior, because I have to save myself, you see. But we like the idea of exemplar, that I can look at a great being and see what's to be done, and then emulate that. See. A monkey imitates, but a human being should emulate. You don't go to a zoo to see your ancestors in Vedanta. Your ancestors are great beings. They're powers of God, not mere monkeys. So that first divine power is a very intense one. It's something to wrap your mind around, and then go out as a ray from a sun every day. Don't stifle yourself, but be a ray from that sun. Jagat, the universe itself, is a power of God. The universe is God's glory. People see his glory and forget everything else. They do not seek God. This universe has evolved from God. So, puts it in the right order. This is a put it in the right perspective, right order teaching. You see, because you say, "Oh, great, the universe is God's glory," and you say, "Great." You see, I thought it was an illusion. I guess Vedanta isn't right. And then all of a sudden you think, "Well, wait a minute. Where's God in it? If it's just his glory, am I just going to get obsessed with suns and sun rays and sunsets and half moons and full moons and so forth? Am I going to get drawn out into space or into the atomic particle? Where's the real essence in the thing? Oh, I see, it's not a thing. It's in all things, but it's not a thing. It manifests as all forms, but it's not a form. It gives names to everything, but it's not a name. See? Then you're on the right track. right order, right perspective. One of the first of Buddha's teachings, right perspective, right orientation, Eightfold Path. A 6 or 7-year-old boy yesterday told me, they said, mentioned something about Buddha, and he said, "Oh yeah, Buddha, who gave us the fourfold, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path." Oh, really, you know about them? A 7-year-old Western boy? Great, excellent. And he's not going to a Buddhist monastery to learn that. He's getting some of it vicariously through religion and school and so forth, making its way back into the thinking process. Oh, it must be important. Now you can get a brand new T-shirt that SRV has put out, you see, for our fundraiser. It has one of my sayings across it: there is no such thing as a foreign religion. And underneath that, all religion is indigenous to your soul. So we bring back that kind of person with the universal mindset. All beings have it, but Maya has covered it or distorted it. Tamas, Rajas, right? Avarana and Vikshepa. But can we bring out the revelatory power in the child, in our schooling, in the parents first, so that they bring their children amongst truth seekers and truth teachers? See, that would be something of a remarkable step towards returning to the Dharma. Manas, your own mind, is a power of God. I don't think anyone could probably really argue with that unless they don't believe in God, and then they would just say Manas, mind, is a power. Either way, Shakti is there. Shakti is power. He says, regardless of the path one follows, yoga is not possible until the mind is stilled. Not that kind of stilled, where you're going to sleep, but where your peace of mind. See, that's what you're seeking, right? So you have to practice it, and it'll come to you. The mind of a yogi is under his control, and so therefore a mind of a yogini would be under her control. He is not under the control of his mind. So that's what they mean by a mind that's truly powerful. It's been placed in service, like a mule. And it's going to pull the intellect and the ego right to Brahman. It's the chariot, as you might have noticed in Krishna's teachings. 5 horses are pulling the chariot. The 5 horses are the senses, and chariot's the mind. But there are occupants in the chariot. There are also reins going from horses to the chariot. What are those signify? 5 reins.
Senses.
No, the senses are the horses.
Oh, the control over the senses.
Yes, which means prana. Yeah, over unseen things. See, here's the unseen again. We don't know why we see, or why we hear, or why we touch, or why we taste. We don't know that. It's prana, that's why. Prana makes us move, prana makes us see, prana makes us act, prana makes us think. So first find the prana, affirm it, get a hold of it like the reins, and pull in the senses, and store up all that power that was going out only, bahir, and pull it in, antara. See, he's called antaryami, see, in the tradition. Antar means the inner ruler. Anything that's inside, that's subtle, that can't be seen, antaryami. The inner ruler, immortal, seated in the heart of all things. Residing there in the heart, you see. So these powers, you see how important they are to connect them to the heart. The conversation you and I had day before yesterday, all day we talked about it really. How mind and heart intersect. Meda Kendra, Jnana Bhakti. See? How the 2 wings of the bird work together to help you soar. So, important these teachings, and important to connect them to what's happening to you in your life. Even much more important than the chariot then would be the occupant, and that's the intellect. The buddhi is a great power. I would say one of the greatest, if not the greatest, in all the worlds is intelligence. It's unfortunately a little bit underrated in this world, or it's applied only to the secular side of things, which is a conversation you and I were having this morning. The mundane, secular, materialistic way of thinking, and its stodgy, narrow confines. You see, beings are rolling, minds are rolling along that way of thinking and unable to get out. Like Buddha said, get out of the river on the banks, and then you'll start to truly see. You see. So intelligence of a much higher kind is very, very underrated. Higher knowledge, higher wisdom, scriptural wisdom would be a good start there. And whereas Swamiji does say, in books and temples vain thy search, he says it's good to be born in a religion but don't die in a religion. It means you need to go beyond books, temples, and religions in order to get the truth that they had. Because there was no Christianity when Christ walked the earth, or Buddhism when Lord Buddha was here, see. Not amongst the people. Those things, of course, are eternal verities, but they're eternal verities back in the mind with its intellect, see. Its intelligence, that's where you find them stored, like seeds. We talked about that yesterday. Unmanifested nature, everything's stored as seed. But make sure that you don't become a seed stored in unmanifested prakriti. The soul is not a seed. The soul is the sower, you see, of seed. So people who die in ignorance, they go to unmanifested prakriti too, and they don't have an afterlife, if you want to use a sort of term. You see, they have just a blank, and then they're born again and not know where they came from, who they are, who they were before, what they knew before. Is that the way it is? We just start over every time, without taking stock or recourse to what we've stored up in the past. Truncated existence like that, separated. See. Like on a manufacturer's belt, everything's just cut into portions, you see, marching along the same route? Or are we going to have an ingenious turn of thought? See, again, getting a hold of the revelatory power and everything, and begin to think in ingenious ways. And beyond the genius, the seer, the yogi, the realized soul, beyond the genius. So he says about intelligence, a man's intelligence is very delicate and can get covered, distorted, or misled. He must therefore practice many austerities so as to acquire divine knowledge. Of all the things that we admire about Ramakrishna and his order, that would have to be the most right there. Their natural renunciation of the world. They weren't born to enjoy the world. They weren't born to be misled by the world thinking it to be real. They were in full knowledge of their soul. And when they went to Ramakrishna, they wanted that, take that soul that they were in full knowledge of and have him hone it further. So you have a Vedananda walking the Himalayas barefoot in the winter and not even noticing it. Totally out of their body. You see, doing intense practices in Varanasi or Vrindavan, or going on pilgrimage, wandering over the breadth and depths of India, the whole subcontinent. Finally, Vivekananda left and jumped the ocean like Hanuman and came to the west, you see, to bring us that knowledge, which is always a matter of stored up renunciation. When you're eating food and sublimating it, like didn't I just say you store up the senses instead of from going out, you store them up inwardly? Well, it's the same when you start working with mind and intellect. You want to store up its energy too. And that results in a natural renunciation. You have a store of renunciation. And you prefer living with nothing. Before you started out saying, I don't own anything, I shouldn't own anything. But you end up saying, I don't care to own anything. It's not a matter of having to renounce anymore, it's just natural. So natural renunciation is like that. And look at what he says here. A man's intelligence is distorted by covering power, distorting power, and misleading power. So there you have again tamas, rajas, and sattva, don't you? Sattva misleads you into a happy existence, thinking that that's all there is. But you're going to have to transcend that. And the final two, prema, love, would certainly be one of the great powers. He says, what is prema? Let's hear what Sri Ramakrishna says about love. The one who feels it, this intense and ecstatic love for God, not only forgets the world, but also forgets even the body, which is so dear to all. Does it sound like the definition of love you've found in other walks of life? Are people running around saying, oh, I'm in love with God, I'm in love with God? Or are they in love with some fool who's only going to divorce them in a couple of years, or take their money, or leave them high and dry? See? What is real love? The duck loves the water, but the water doesn't love the duck, he said. So love is one-sided in the world. When you learn that lesson, then you can begin to love in the right way, and you love the right thing. You love the right thing in the right way. We're back to Lord Buddha's right perspective. You see. You've got your ducks in order, because the duck loves the water, but the water doesn't love the duck. So you have your ducks in the right order. You see. And then it all proceeds naturally. And he says, one of the tests of that is that if you forget the world and forget your body is usually so dear to you. Vivekananda came here and he said, oh, they're fine people, the Westerners, the Americans. The only problem is that money is their God. They're generous to a fault, and they're good, good-minded, but the problem is that money is their God. And you've never seen so many instruments for cutting the hair, painting the face, cutting the toenails, the toilet. You see, never seen such people so fascinated with their bodies as these people. So he made those comments about us, whereas he looked in the mirror and couldn't even recognize himself. See? Ramakrishna never saw himself, except he was looking in a river one day and saw himself and said, who's that? You see, they took a picture of him once, and he didn't know it. Later he saw that picture and said, this shows a man in a very high state of samadhi. As if he didn't even know who the man was, you see. So can I live without paying so much attention to my body? Maybe it's more like I should live without paying the least bit of attention to it. Or, as the scriptures say, just enough to keep it healthy, so that it can do its job. And things like mind and intellect can begin to take the forefront. See? And body can just become something that follows along like a trained puppy, see? And doesn't cause problems, like pride and arrogance, and catering to the physical only, you see. So that body which is so dear to all. Jnana, knowledge, is the last one. Intelligence, devotion, compassion, renunciation, these belong to the realm of true knowledge. With these, a man comes near to God. One more step, and he attains God. So Sri Ramakrishna also used to say it's like a staircase. Once you get to this certain level of realization of God, you're just one step away from seeing God face to face. That's a very auspicious, precious moment in a chain of people's lifetimes. Very auspicious moment. And it's rare to see and rare to experience yourself. So, what do you think? The 6 treasures and 6 divine powers, a helpful teaching to you? And what he says about them? And how he exemplifies them too. Very beautiful way of operating. There's actually a beautiful song about Sri Ramakrishna that they sing sometimes. It goes something like this. Banga Hridaya Gomukhi Hayate Karuna Ganga Bahya Jai Eso Chute Esho Kesho Manam Shushka Kanta Pipasai Banga Banga Hridaya Gomuki Haite. It's almost Muslim influence. You see it. Hi, ya hi, ya hi, ya hi. You do zikr around a song like that. See? Banga Hridaya Gomuki Haite. Bubbling up from the very heart of Bengal, the sacred Ganges is streaming compassion upon everyone. Take heed and come forth, all ye who would drink its sanctifying waters of eternal life. And then the song goes on, from birth to death, and death to birth goes the soul, driven inexorably by the burning fire of unfilled desires. Come, friend, the phenomenal world is but a mirage, and you have exhausted yourself chasing illusions. One dip in the river of Ramakrishna will refresh you completely, and it will remove all sorrows and anxieties. So sing with me. Banga Hridaya Gomuki Hayate, Banga Hridaya Gomuki Hayate, Karuna Ganga Bahiya Jai, Esho Chute Esho Kecho Manam, Shushka Kanta Vipasai, Banga Hridaya Gomuki Hayate. Take a dip in the river of Ramakrishna, and you'll be dipping into these kinds of things. The world is illusory, a world of phenomena only, and you're exhausted yourself chasing illusions. So why not chase something more beneficial? Make these your new, how do they say it, list.
Bucket list?
Huh?
Bucket list?
Bucket list, thank you. Make this your new bucket list, you see, and all those other things you thought you wanted to do, like climb Mount Everest or something, put them off for a while. From the highest mountains to the deepest oceans, we've seen this earth and what it has to offer. But what we haven't seen are the divine powers of the Lord. And guess what? You are one of them. See the irony of it? You are one of them. Are you acting like it? Are you thinking like it? Then step up. Step up. Measure yourself by a new barometer. Take a temperature. See where you're healthy and where you're still lacking. I think we'll just sing that song over and over again till the break. Bubbling up from the very heart of Bengal. Where was he from? Bengal. So take a dip in the river of Ramakrishna. Now, we have covered that sloka pretty thoroughly. We can probably do one more before the break, and that would be sloka 9. The Lord of Maya projects the Vedas, the sacrifices, spiritual practices, past and future, religious observances, all that the Vedas declare, and the whole world including ourselves, projection of Brahman. The other again is bound by Maya in all this. So, though all of these things are projected by the Lord, all the way down to Jagat, the universe, and the worlds, we remain in Maya. And we don't know where it came from. See the beauty of it all. Putting it together with a collected teaching like this, how people are so covered, their knowledge is so covered about the divine nature of things. We intuit it, we talk about it once in a while, we think about it quite often, we desire it most intensely, a world full of beauty and love and spirituality and compassion, don't we? But the very fact is that it's all a projection of Brahman, from the highest to the lowest, from the most benign to the most malicious. Everything, a projection of Brahman. See? And the key word in Vedanta is projection, not creation. God doesn't create. See? To create something out of nothing is not possible, so it always existed. And to take something into a form, you see, is also not possible because it's formless in its nature. To see something in form means it must have been formless before you put it into form. Wasn't the invention of the inventor formless before he put it into form? So everything comes out of formlessness. So when they say this is a projection out of the great mind, then if we want to make our way back to the great mind, we're moving towards avyaktam. In Sanskrit and in Samkhya philosophy, Mahat stands just below avyaktam, which is the unmanifested. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva would be the first manifestation, the Trinity. And that's the very first semblance of form you could possibly recognize, like catching a slight whiff of form on the air, you see, as it drifted by. Very, very subtle, that you would go back and have darshan, communion with cosmic principles that deep in you. That deep in you. Dupa, dupa, dupa. So dive deep in the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the uttermost depths, there you will find the gem of love. See? So, are you willing to dive deep? You put on your aqualung suit, store up some oxygen, some prana, some energy, and take a deep dive in meditation and find the gem of love. Or if you don't, practice again and again, dive again and again until you find it, and build up some lung power as you do. See? It's a long, hard row to hoe. See? This is a razor's edge path. And you're not looking for gross results. They're all subtle. You might already have found them, but you don't know it yet, you see. You might already found that you are divine, but you don't really know it yet. You're one of the powers of God, yet you're not stepping up and admitting it, affirming it. You won't let yourself deserve that. You won't give your permission, you see, for it. And you think it has to be earned or something, but the victory's already been won. That's one of the statements out of the Mother Scriptures. The victory is already won. She's won the battlefield. The ego lost. And proven when she sends someone like him to the world. That's why we say, Jai Shri Ramakrishna. Everyone say it. Jai Shri Ramakrishna at his birthday and his puja last night. We said it over and over again as we waved the 5-flame lamp in front of his image and fanned his image with the chamara, see, and offered flowers and garland to him that was made by our own hands out of the elements of nature, purified the mind and senses, did everything to him. We're really saying victory to you. Is that some sort of hero worship? Or is it just saying the battle's already won and we just haven't been there to see it yet, you see. We're in the battle, yet we don't see the mother winning. We are her weapons. See? We are her tools. The Jivatman, the embodied soul, is the proof of God's existence. Where else are you going to find God? On a cloud? Up in the sky? No, Vivekananda said, you're going to find him in your own soul. That's where you find divinity. And that's what Advaita Vedanta is all about, just proving that one thing to you. If you can just meet on that meeting ground with that one fact and understand it, then you'll be like him, coming once a week to hear it. He loves to hear it. But for most of it, it's a matter of letting it gel, settle in, and mature. See, the earlier you hear it, the better for you. Earlier you hear it, the better for you. Like at 12 years old, see, or younger. How many years is it going to take to really quintessentialize into some profound realizations and begin to see yourself in it all? See. So the Lord of Maya projects everything. That's the gist of this sloka, including ourselves. But people remain bound in Maya. And that's why I put this up. See, 3 types of bondage, 3 types of liberation. This is one of the most ancient teachings on the subject from Samkhya philosophy, or Lord Kapila. And some of his quotes are there. Let's look at it before the break. It puts everything in terms of the soul and nature, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is pure consciousness, an ever-aware spiritual entity who, through connection with Prakriti, assumes jivahood. Nature's part in this is that it's the bond-slave of the soul, so it will contribute form. The soul is formless, the world has form. So put them together and you're going to have a combination of Purusha Prakriti. And those who associate with the form are fine. Those who identify with the form, back to the quote, you see, back to the sloka rather, they stay bound in Maya. You see, they identify with the form as if it were real. But those who merely associate with it, they're fine. They can play, like at recess. Ever wise, ever free, the Purusha never actually falls into the bondage of ignorance. When I'm talking in the vein I just was speaking to you, I mean you're never in ignorance. Ignorance is in you. So get rid of it. That is, you don't have to be one of those that's bound in Maya. If you heard this truth early on, or if you've meditated on it for years or decades, then it's about time just to slough off your skin. Get thee behind me with all the rest. Right? Because the sooner you do that, the surer success, faster, swifter, and surer the success is going to be. See? You can't end up brooding on a lot of things that may never happen. So get all of that behind me, as Christ said. That's devilish. See? And let's concentrate on the divine and just watch how our life changes for the better. 3 kinds of bondage. Basically, put in a nutshell, to nature, to sense objects, and to money. Basically, I can jump to the chase there, or conventional life. But money supplies conventional life. Money can also supply the Dharma, which would be ideal, but usually not the case in the greater percentage of the world. Now, we don't know a lot about Lord Kapila, and his scriptures have all been lost except 1 or 2, like this Tattva Samasa Sutra that I gathered some of this information from. But here's some of the sayings around the teachings that he gave that influenced everything, everyone, through all the Vedic period and Vedanta, Yoga, Buddhism, Tantra. What Kapila did by gathering the 24 cosmic principles and teachings like the 3 kinds of bondage and 3 kinds of liberations influenced everyone in India and in other traditions too. He says about bondage to nature, prakritika bandha. Prakriti, nature, is the primordial source of all evolutes. The greater amount of it remains unmanifest. Right away he gives us the teaching that it's formless in its essence. And this is the tip of the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg. Not the bulk. What you're seeing here in all its glory, Bala, that attracts you so much, attracts you away from the fact that most of nature is unmanifest. It's below the surface. And Vedanta is very, very good at getting below the surface. See? Appearances are not going to do it. You have to get the real meaning of the thing. Like outer tree, inner tree, and essence tree would be a teaching from, say, Buddhist schools, like Dalai Lama says. See, outer tree is wood and form, is a Maya nature. Inner tree is atomic particle tree. Essence tree is Buddha nature tree. See? One's the essence, the other's a thought, and the other's everything that came from the thought. So that's unmanifested prakriti spilling out into manifested prakriti. A tip appears. What is manifest, beings identify with it. taking the non-eternal for the eternal, the impure for the pure. They mistake the trans-evolutional Purusha for evolving matter. You're mistaking your soul for matter. So, he doesn't mince words or mess around. In fact, what he said right there is pretty much part of the essence of Vedanta, isn't it? So around nature, he wants you to know there's a manifested side and an unmanifested side. And that's going to be very important to you when you come to understand all of these teachings that are going to help you define that further. And when you come to know Ishvara. You know, sometimes they sing about Ishvara in such beautiful ways. I would venture to say that the way it's sung in this particular hymn is known by everyone, because Mahatma Gandhi loved it and used it when he sings Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Jaya Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Bhaja Pyare tu Sitaram Ishvara Allah Tero Naam Sabko Sanmati De Bhagavan Ishvara Allah Tero Naam Sabko Sanmati De Bhagavan Jaya Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram. So, Ishvara, Allah, Teronam, whatever name you call that reality by, Ishvara or Allah, that is the Lord, Bhagavan. You can call it Bhagavan. So Ishvara is a very important element, because that is the Purusha you're talking about at a grand level, because usually Purusha has been allocated to the individual soul, you see. But when you get to the collective and to the cosmic, you have soul of great proportion, great wisdom, great compassion, great love, and they're all in possession of those powers, those divine powers that we just talked about. And those are what you should be going after if you're seeking spiritual life. The 8 occult powers, forget them. Levitation, becoming invisible, see, dominating over other beings, forget those things. The 8 occult powers are like crow droppings by the side of the road, Sri Ramakrishna said. But the 6 powers, those are different kinds of powers. Those have manifested from great souls who know how to use them. So in this chart then, talking about bondage to nature, we have to know that it's manifested and unmanifested, and that everything that's unmanifested feeds the manifest, and the manifest goes back into the unmanifested. And this is why this arrow is here. It's a constant cycle. Some icebergs never melt, Sri Ramakrishna said. They just persist and grow and melt and grow and melt. So in that Arctic Ocean of Nama, Rupa, Desha, Kala, Nimitta, name, form, time, space, and causation, or karma, that's always going on. But the Ishvara stands at the apex of this, you see, and looks on that process. That's what you should be doing. Remember the 2 birds? Ishvara is that upper bird, and the Jivatman, you see, is that lower bird that still hasn't made up its mind, isn't in the right perspective yet. Haven't got his ducks all in a row perfectly yet, see. Let's look at, in the 5 minutes remaining, Vaikritika Bandha. This is all coming off of that sloka number 9 in chapter 4.
he says, the various incapacities of mind and intelligence adversely affect the 5 cognitive and 5 active senses, subjecting them to ignorance and turning them towards the 9 complacencies and away from the 8 great accomplishments. The 5 major hells then take root, and life under the mantle of the 3 kinds of pain ensues. That one paragraph is classic, because these are all his teachings. 5 kinds of hells, the 3 kinds of pain, the 9 complacencies, and the 8 great accomplishments. Those we have left from Tattva Samatra Sutras, Lord Copula, and we've given teachings individually on them. I've composed charts on them so we can look at them. For instance, the 8 great accomplishments are attaining peace 3 times. Peace on the outside, peace on the inside, and peace transcendental. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. If you can do that, then they feel the 3 great accomplishments. And then the 5 lesser accomplishments are getting a guru, studying the scriptures, taking to a certain path and completing it, getting friends and compatriots and so forth. You have this whole bucket list again of spiritual life attainment and what they call the great accomplishments. Nowhere in there is there anything about money, fame, worldliness. Nowhere in there. None of that's great accomplishment. And these are the things you want, because if you get these, all else will be added unto you in the right way, see, not in the wrong way that keeps going askew on you, keeps backfiring on you. So all else will be added unto thee. Great teaching by Jesus 5 or 6, 7,000 years later than Copula. All right, one minute or so left. Let's look at, we could take this and just make a retreat out of it, really, sometime. We could take a Samkhya retreat, just take that one, those 4 teachings inside of it. But know that it's just bondage to sense objects. They're conveniently showing you what you should be wary of. Nature, attachment to nature, attachment to sense objects, but also attachment to conventional life, what Lexikson, our founder, called mundane conventional thinking. See? Mundane human convention, I think he called it. Complacency, basically, the Rajas Tamas kind of problem. Then, so about that he says, common people's involvement with the ordinary desires and needs of life breeds preoccupation with mundane existence, shorn of religious practice and spiritual realization. Shorn of them. Good and bad acts of stupefaction then follow. That's one of his teachings. There are bad acts of stupefaction and there are good acts of stupefaction. Marvelous, really. See? Let's go and take our army and create world peace. Kill people along the way, see. That's an act of good stupefaction. So people have all sorts of intentions. Let's dam up the river so my children will have a place to swim behind the house. But not even consider that downstream people are dying of thirst because I did. That's an act of good stupefaction. So when you think about good karma, bad karma, and mixed karma, then you know that area of mixed karma is a real knotty problem, you see. It's fraught with problems, people with good intentions, but no wisdom behind it. See, no foresight, no advanced thinking, no higher wisdom. Probably haven't even cracked a book like Svetashvatara Upanisad ever in their life. See, cracked a book, expression. All right, so there's Ma Kali the destroyer with her sword of wisdom telling you, let's do away with these 3 kinds of bondages, be content and be free, which I want you to do for the next 15 minutes at your break. So we will return soon for the second half. Aloha and namaste.
we have returned to this classroom at SRV San Francisco, and we are in the midst of chapter 4 of the great Svetashvatara Upanisad, and we have looked at 9 slokas. We are on the 9th, and that 9th sloka has brought up the teaching of the Lord Kapila around the 3 types of bondage and the 3 types of liberation, which is on the chart on your left. And we have looked at the first half of that, that is how nature can bind us, how sense objects can bind us, which is really, sense objects are made of the gross elements of nature. Although sense objects here can also mean subtle sense objects, like things we get attached to in dream, that we dream about, and it's also a sense object. And then also money in conventional life. It's called dakshina bandha. Dakshina is kind of your due. You go to India, and sometimes you hear that, dakshina, you want some sort of recompense or some sort of payment. And so we looked at that, and we looked at all 3, and we looked at the 3 quotes that Lord Kapila gave us, all of them very pregnant with teachings, and that we will take up at another time. But we might turn the corner here and go towards those happier teachings of what liberates us. And it's an interesting teaching all its own when you get to that, because he declares that there's a liberation of wisdom, there's a liberation of detachment, and there's a liberation of transcendence. So right away you can see his deep thinking, and you could pretty much look at those as different avenues that people follow. Maybe monastic temperament might be more inclined to go the avenue of detachment or even transcendence, whereas the householder and other stations of life might be more attracted, the intellectual, and certainly the early aspirant attracted to the art of detachment, because they realize that attachments like are listed here, it's not just bondage to nature and sense objects, but it's also attachment to them that creates more bondage in a future lifetime. So they've realized that these attachments are very heavy weights on them, and so they like to hear the teaching of detachment. In fact, many people come to the teaching of detachment before they come to the teaching of discrimination between the real and the unreal. So Viveka should really, ideally, be put first. That's, Vivekananda took his name after that to sort of go around the world, the nameless one, and so, I guess I'll take that name since I need a name. Vivekananda was it, the bliss of discrimination between essential and non-essential things. And so that's a very good teaching for people, but a lot of people don't complete that teaching before they jump into detachment, in much the same way that people jump into meditation before they, say, complete the yamas and niyamas, which we were looking at yesterday on the tree of yoga. Remember, we had, those of you who are here, we had the tree of samsara on one side, the tree of yoga on the other, and the roots of each tree were very different. Tamas and so forth was the root of the tree of samsara, but the root of the tree of yoga was ahimsa, non-violence, and truthfulness, and non-covetousness, and non-giving and receiving of lands and gifts, and tapas, which was one of the glories of God too, you saw. Those kinds of things, some people never really start into them, some of them, or even complete them, like, say, study of scripture, swadhyaya. Before they start meditating, they say, oh, I want to skip all those words. And then they start meditating, you see. And so their meditations sort of lead them accordingly. Sometimes they try and jump from the lowest step to the highest step, like, say, to transcendence, without having understood detachment, or maybe without having accrued any wisdom. So it's not that these, on the other hand, are completely separate paths. Sometimes we're following all 3, but we're doing it in stages. I would say it especially applies to the intermediate and advanced aspirant, someone who's been into the teachings for a long time, or someone with natural intelligence that can understand quickly, and it doesn't take them a long time to comprehend things. Doesn't mean it's not good to take a long time to manana, to roll them over in your mind, because you might be missing certain elements of them that are very important and didn't occur to you before. So a quick understanding, a quick study is a good thing for the intellect, but it's also good to take time and look back on things and ruminate, contemplate, like a cow chews its cud. You want to chew that wisdom with the mind for a long time to get the most out of it. So I would say that is a sort of preliminary teaching around the three kinds of liberation. It's more important to know that these things will lead you to liberation, not so much which one do I need to take, because as I said, you might be practicing all three at once, or you might be practicing two of them and heading for the third, because the liberation of transcendence is a rare thing. Very few people think, oh, I think I'll give up this world, and and they do it flat out like that. There's always some sort of what Sri Ramakrishna called monkey renunciation going on. So they think I'll give up the world, but they really still have desires there. So they try and give it up, and it doesn't work, and they go back to the world. And it sort of ruins their trajectory that they're going along, ruins their step-by-step process, which actually Sri Ramakrishna favored very much. He wanted you to go step by step and not jump steps. And there was no shame in it, and there was no indication that you were lower or at a lesser stage simply because you did that. It's actually ideal to fill in the stages step by step. And slow growth makes for a more substantial statement in the long run. One of the first things I ever read of any kind of wisdom in a book, I clipped it out, put it on my bulletin board as I was a teenager, before I got into Vedanta in this lifetime. Slow maturation makes for a more substantial statement in the long run. It's sort of a kind of a Vedic-like clip. So to mature, again, over time is the idea. So you may be headed towards the liberation of transcendence. So let's look at these liberations. All of this coming out of that study of the 9th sloka in the Svetashvatara Upanisad about everything being an emanation of the Lord, yet people get caught in the emanation and don't see the Lord itself. And they get caught in the Maya, and they don't. Once they discover Mother, then they discover Mahamaya, the great Mother. Then they have these kinds of liberations, and she will help you with her sword of wisdom. So about the liberation of wisdom, it's called Jnana Mukti. Mukti is that key word in Vedanta. You could also use the word moksha. Mukti or moksha are very key words in Vedanta around true freedom, what we would call not just freedom of a vacation or freedom from the kids or freedom from, even the freedom of taking a retreat away from the world for a few days or going to a mountain cave, but actually a kind of absolute freedom that the soul feels when it is free of all trammels and all weights. It's really attained something marvelous. He says about it, with knowledge of the components of the non-self brought about by the study of the chain of universal causation, the full expansion of wisdom duly manifests, and cognizance of the distinction between Prakriti and Purusha dawns on the mind. The elimination of pain is the result. So you want free of your sufferings and your pains, then study the chain of causations. I had him up here yesterday in the dissolution of the mind stream chart, and it's what this book is about. Pretty much takes the chain of causations called the 24 cosmic principles, and it lists them from inner to outer and from outer to inner. In fact, here it is. Sancharaha prati sancharaha. There is a chain of transition from unmanifested Prakriti to manifested Prakriti and its evolutes, ending in the grossest evolute called earth. There is also a reverse transition of evolutes, ending in dissolution back into unmanifested Prakriti. So everything is marching out from unmanifested Prakriti through intellect, mind, ego, subtle senses, subtle elements, gross elements, in fives, marching out. That's what he means here by, if you want to gain freedom from suffering, then knowledge of the components of the non-self brought about by the study of the chain of causation will get rid of your suffering. That's what Patanjali promised, and that's what Kapila promised, and what he delivered. And what Patanjali emphasized later by meditating on air, earth, fire, water, and ether, rather than just swimming in it or enjoying the heat or looking into the stars, actually meditate on the actual elements themselves in all sorts of ways from all sides. And that was yoga's addition to the Samkhya philosophy, the expansion of it in yoga. But back to Kapila's time, he was very adamant about that will bring the demise of your suffering. Why? Because you're living in doubt around how things manifest. You don't know the secret of manifestation, that is projection. Isn't that what the sloka said here? You know, Lord of Maya projects everything, even yourself, is a projection. If you're a power of God, as if within the other chart, a power is a projection from a source, right? So you're a weapon, but the arm is actually doing the wielding. So Shakti is here, but Shaktiman is the wielder of the Shakti power. So that's, what's animating the Jivatman. Prana isn't the only thing animating him. That's just animating his body and nerves and appetites and so forth. But Shakti power inside, is doing the more quintessential manifestation, if you're aware of her. That's why Ramakrishna said, I do nothing. I'm like a marionette on 5 strings. And she pulls the strings, moves me everywhere. I do nothing of my own. So 5 strings, figure it out. All the sets of 5s that are moving us at different levels. So very important that we stop there and take that quote apart a little bit. There is a chain of causation from unmanifested prakriti to manifested prakriti. There it is. Great mind, intellect, ego, mind, subtle elements, senses, and gross elements. And then there is a reverse transition of the same back to their source. That's how important nature is to us. When we look at the importance of nature in science, or the importance of nature in biology or in anthropology and so forth, nature is its own reality. See? And there's no other reality connected with it. But we look at nature in Vedanta and in yoga and in philosophy and so forth. Nature takes on this very great significance, but we keep it in the category of the insentient. We don't give it any power over us. The only sentiency is in us, Atman, and nature is insentient. It's not working of its own accord. See? Like James Jean said at the turn of the century, we looked at nature for a while and we thought that it looked like a machine producing rivers and mountains and flowers and trees. It looked like a machine just pumping them out. But when we looked closer, we thought we all of a sudden understood that it looked more like a thought than a machine. That there was a source behind all that production. That was intelligence, you see. And there's the intelligence right there, the great mind. And there's your intelligence right there that comes out of the great mind. So this is here we are, 20 years later, and I'm still harping on it. How important is the cosmology to know, and now also to know that it reverses its transition. Evolution, involution. There's not just evolution. And nature didn't start by itself, out of a big bang or some physical energy. It had a source in the mind. Everything here is a thought. And it's just been concretized. Thought has been concretized into an object. If you make that connection, then you know what he's talking about here, back 10,000 years BC, when he's talking about 24 cosmic principles, their transition and their return. Buddha later, 3,500, 4,000 years later, said, that's the river that's going around. That's the Kala Chakra. That's the wheel of time that Kapila was talking about. He's just defined all the elements in it. What I'm telling you in this age, in my age, the Buddha age, is that you better get out of that river and look at it for a while. Because when you get out it and look at it happening back and forth, you'll want off it, like I did. I got off it. And I named myself the Buddha. At the end of his life, he said, there's one thing you can call me. That's the Buddha. I am intelligence. It's like saying Shivaham Shivaham, right? I am that most intelligent one. There's many things you could say about me, he said, but one thing that I could tell you to say about me, I am the Buddha. I am the awakened one. So that awakening happened by getting out of the river of time, space, and causation, this river, this ocean. And when he withdrew with it and sat on the banks, he saw everything coming around again. And when he saw everything coming around again, then he knew it was all cyclic. Bingo, nirvana was on him, you see. As soon as he found out it was all cyclic, he was free. Or he was penultimately free. Why do you think Kapila is saying here? With knowledge of the components of the non-self brought about by study of the chain of universal causation, the full expansion of wisdom duly manifests. Pain, the end of pain is the result. Pain is caused by ignorance. Wisdom gets rid of it. Do you remember Krishna said, thorn in your flesh, get another thorn. Take it out. Then toss them, both. When you're done with knowledge, it has to end in truth, you see. So knowledge and ignorance are a duality you don't want to play with for very long. But come to find out that both thorns are off the same bush. And that bush is this eternal cycle of things, you see. Knowledge and ignorance are in them, continually cycling. One lifetime I'm a knowledgeable person, the next lifetime I forgot everything. See, I have to start over. What kind of life is that? I want to be eternally in wisdom. See, I want to have the liberation of wisdom. Once and for all. Because if I have it once for all, there's no more rebirth in the womb of matter for me. Only emanation from my Divine Mother. I'm quoting a song. Ram Prasad sings. No more birth in the womb of matter for me. Only emanation from my Divine Mother. So if I'm born again at all, I'm born as a wisdom ray. Read my chart. I'm a power of God. The universe has come out of me. My mind and intellect is refined. I have love and I have knowledge. All by knowing the chain of transition in and out, how it goes in cycles. And when it disappears, that it's still there as unmanifested prakriti, pradana. All worlds, all things, all objects in potential. They all went into seed form. They never died. They were never destroyed. You can't destroy something that's not created. You destroy your dream tonight, it returns. Destroy a clay cup, it still exists as the thought clay cup. Commit an act of violence, and the person you killed or the race that you desecrated is still there in your mind, haunting you. See? You can't destroy anything. It's not a matter of thou shalt not kill. It's a matter of thou cannot kill. Why are you creating more karma for yourself and not getting any satisfaction of even killing? See? You can't even get any satisfaction from killing. Most people find that out in prison. I teach in prison. See, those people who have committed that ill, that transgression, have told me, I didn't get anything out of it. I thought I would feel good, But for a conscious person, it doesn't feel good. It haunts them. And there was no payoff to it either. Besides, if you could sit around saying, oh, that was fun to kill that person, that would be great, At least you'd get something out of murder. But you can't. And especially when you find out that you didn't really kill them after all. They're there in the next lifetime as your karma. Staring you in the face saying, my turn, you see. But actually, I recovered from that malady. I forgive you for killing me in another lifetime. Let me cut off your head in another way. You see? Cut off my head literally in the past lifetime on the guillotine. Let me cut off your head in a new way. It's called Mother Kali, you see. Extend your neck. And let me give you the teaching of the transition of evolutes and their
reverse transition back into an ocean of unmanifested nature that never dies and is never born. Then the only thing left for you to do is be to get out of that ocean, get out of that river and sit on the banks. Know yourself to be the producer of this. Because in the meantime, you thought God did it. And God had no hand in that. Hands off of that, you see. I'll let my mind do it. But I'm not going to get involved in it. See. I'll let my bowers do it. I've got plenty of them, and they want to get in there and mess it up. They can do so, you see. But I'm staying detached. I'm staying transcendent. So let's look at those levels of wisdom. I hope I've ramrodded that teaching again into you once again. It's important, this transition of evolutes and their reverse. Because if we do think of evolutes at all, and science will start here on out, right? But look at how you have to go back in for the causes of things. Intellect, mind, great mind, God's mind, and so forth. You have to go back in for those causes. If you only start there, then your cycle is only evolution. That's all you believe in. And you don't know what's going to happen. And you only live one lifetime, so you'll never know what's going to happen. You see, religion and science get into cahoots and come to loggerheads, and then you're caught between a rock and a hard place, and you don't know the truth of the matter. But if you're a Buddha and you get intelligence, you get out and you see the whole thing happening. You get out and you say, I'm done with it. I've got the liberation of wisdom. I know everything I want. I'm free now. That's why it gets rid of your pain. And precious little else ever gets rid of your pain. Other things for a little while, but knowledge for good. Knowledge, higher wisdom will get rid of your pain for good. Even in life, if you deal with disease and death and so forth, that pain will seem like nothing to you in knowledge, as it did when it felt like in ignorance. Let's look at Vaitrishna Mukti, the liberation of detachment. These aren't necessarily in graded order, but I'd say, the liberation of transcendence is, pretty much of an ultimate one. But liberation of detachment, Kapila says about that, when clear understanding concerning the distinction of nature, the insentient world of objects, and soul, the sentient spiritual energy, dawns, all fetters and attachments to the transient realm of name and form are struck away. Purusha realizes its transcendent nature. So you can see how it would be a window, a doorway, as it were, into the next transition. So you're coming to know the distinction between the sentient and the insentient. And isn't that what I was just saying? Here's what you know with wisdom, right? But when you know this, what's going to be the result of this kind of knowledge? Oh, I see I'm different from nature, you see. Give me the cylinder with oil and water right now, you see. And I will shake it, show you how they mix for about 45 seconds, and then water and oil separate. So nature and soul do not mix, not for good. They associate, then they separate. And that is a kind of oneness that's not a green coconut oneness, where it's all one mass with no layers. When a coconut ripens, it becomes 5 layers, with a little thing rattling around inside called a kernel, that's the Atman. It's not associated with the 5. That is, it's not identified with it. But the kind of distinction you want to make is this healthy distinction that I'm not form, that I'm not matter, that I have no name, that I have no form, that I'm birthless, deathless awareness, that I'm timeless, that I am the Atman. I am Atma Brahma, or I am my Father, or one. That's the kind. You separate yourself away from nature. So this first, see, you get the wisdom of what's going on, know its evolutes and its involutes. Then the conclusion you draw from that is, oh, I see, I'm the sentient soul, Purusha, and that's Prakriti, and never the twain shall meet. Or if they do meet, they'll meet only in association, not in attachment. because otherwise I've got this to deal with. Bondage to nature, bondage to senses. There's nature right there. There's senses right there. And bondage to conventional life, you see. Prana, basically, that's what I was saying. You're bound to life force. You want to have life force. You want to enjoy. Whether they're healthy enjoyments or unhealthy enjoyments, you see, you still want to enjoy. So you're still manipulating the life force. But when you use the life force to gain wisdom, detachment and transcendence, then your mind is free. See, that's the pure mind we're talking about. Atman will be a matter of course. Will be staring you in the face when you purify your mind. Otherwise it's veiling, it's distorting. See, avarana, vikshepa, tamas, rajas. You're thinking yourself to be a finite being instead of an infinite entity, you see. You're thinking yourself to be insentient, but you're actually sentient. Every quote I've given you from every chart today, go back on it in your notes and meditate on that. That's manana. Hear it first and then meditate on it, and you put them all together and follow in the footfalls of the ancient rishis. Each one of these charts is a footstep. And it's the way they saw it at the time they lived. And these were great conscious souls. These were no slouches. See. So Purusha realizes its transcendent nature, and that's called para mukti. You know that word para, right? Supreme. Paramahamsa, para Brahma, para Shiva. That means supreme. So let's see what he says about that. Actuation of the reversal of the transitional chain of evolutes results in the awakened mind's complete dissolution of all manifested principles into unmanifested prakriti. Therefore, the book, Dissolution of the Mind Stream. The gunas in disequilibrium during cyclic manifestation return to equilibrium, and Purusha realizes itself beyond phenomena. You finally get over the stumbling block of the three gunas. That happens at a very, very, very refined and elevated state of realization, that the gunas finally go away. They were there at the very beginning. They really, what nature stands on is these three pillars of inertia, activity, and balance, if you want to put it scientifically. There you'll see that in everything. And when you see it in your mind, sometimes my mind is slothful, sometimes my mind's restless. Where's the peace? See? Where's the peace? You need that first and foremost, she said. So then all of a sudden, when the gunas go back into equilibrium, there's the peace, you see. And the Purusha realizes itself beyond all phenomena. This is all phenomena. From God's mind on down, it's all phenomena. What did he call it? The non-self. Everything from objectum down to the element earth is all the non-self. That's the reason for knowing the 24 cosmic principles. Who said that?
Shankara?
Adi Shankaracharya said it in 700 AD, some 5, 6, 7,000 years later, about Kapila system. Did it take us that long to have someone come along and say that? See, Yoga had us meditate on them so that we would realize them. But Advaita Vedanta in Shankara's time came along and said, everything from abhyaktam, that's unmanifested nature, everything in seed form, all the way down to the earth, that's the non-self. That's not you. And all the way along, you had pain, and you had suffering, and you had doubt, and you had fear and ignorance, because you weren't clear about your disconnection with these things. At some time you might have even thought yourself to be the intellect or God's mind. But you didn't know anything about what lay beyond God's mind, unmanifested prakriti, avyaktam, and what lies beyond that, the Word. And what to speak of the Word, which we said yesterday, you find that in yourself, in your Atman. Then you find your Atman in the Great Self, Brahman. So that's why we sing quite often, and my teacher said it almost every lecture I ever heard him give. He said this: Om Brahma Satchidanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Bandvaititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvama Sharilaksham Ekam Nicham Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Mavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one is the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, by that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Beautiful, you see. The witness of all phenomena, the leader of our souls. Says it in one verse in song form, what you have to study in your scripture and in your study time, in your reading time, and your time with the Guru, so that these things become your way of thinking. Because you have a lot of tendencies from conventional ways of thinking and conventional life and conventional minds to reverse. It'd be nice, all well and good, if you learned this as a child and you said, here I am playing with the elements, and at some point now I'm going to have to return everything to the great mind. And there was nothing in the way. But what's in the way along this trajectory is the thinking of thousands and thousands of ignorant souls who had no idea of this kind of wisdom. Conventional wisdom is the only thing they know. Materiality is the only thing they know. Life of the senses is the only thing they know. They think themselves to be finite, not infinite. And they've thought that way for a long time. Even back in Kapula's time, you see, come out with something like this, you must be mad. What are you talking about? You see, you've got your whole compatriots around you complaining about a new ideology. See, that's actually ancient. All you did was see it. You didn't even compose it. It wasn't your genius. You see, you just went inside, meditated, and said, boom, Mother gave it to you in a revelation. Oh, I see it all spilled out there. I'll just have to note it down for everyone. Oh, there's the Mahat, there's the intellect, there's the mind, and there's prana, and there's the five senses and the five elements. See how they connect? It was revelation, pure sattva. And then you bring it out with people and they start barking like dogs at the feet of an elephant moving through a village, Ramakrishna says. Curs come running when an elephant walks through. Yap, 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 yap. So a great elephant of Kapila comes to the world, or a great elephant like Vivekananda comes to the world. Of all the fish in the sea, Ramakrishna said, Vivekananda is a large-mouthed bass. Those things are huge. Sharks run away sometimes, you see. So these are great souls that have come. And when they come back, they'll talk about eternal truth. From Kapila to Vivekananda, there hasn't been that much variance in fact, absolutely no variance in the quintessential basis of this truth. There have been different ways of presenting it. Now it's given to you. You see, it's given to you to consider and work into your world the way it is right now. And to get through the blocks that your parents and your grandparents and your ancestors and your children will face if you're not careful. To break down this false thinking. To break down these kinds of bondages. To teach people away from them. Then you'll have been, a noble soul that has followed the truth. And it'll be easy for you to reverse the process. And if it isn't, then read my book. Dissolve your mind stream right away, every day, practice it. You'll be much better off for it. Because as you dissolve the mind, then some of these old tendencies and will be gone. You won't even see them go away.
We want to say, oh, I wish I could see that end of suffering, end of pain, you see. I wish I could see that actually happen. But it's not the way Maya is. It doesn't exist, so you can't see it go away. It's the haze inside of your mind. You want to see it go away, but it's not until it actually disappears that you look back on it and say, where did it go? What was it? It was never real in the first place. It just inhabited my mind for a time. I was changing a tire on a tree on a rise on a freeway in a little forest down below me early in the morning, and a fog bank was there. And I went down in the fog bank in there to take care of some business, see. And then I was in the fog bank, waiting for the tow truck. And then basically I couldn't see anything. And then the sun started burning through the fog bank, and I could see everything, see, clear as a bell. Before that there were spooks and goblins and animals and wolves and things in there that were out to get me, you see. All my creatures of my own imagination. But when the sun came out, it was as clear as a bell. That's like Maya. It's a fog that attends your mind. And it's gone as soon as you bring the sunlight of wisdom. As soon as you bring the torch into the cave. Remember Ramakrishna's teaching? The cave's been dark 1,000 years. How long does it take the darkness to go away when you bring a torch in? 1,000 years? That's the nature of Maya. It's unreal. And all of this is the non-self, see, that you're playing with. Realize the one who's the player in the play. Realize the one who's dreaming the dream. But then stand back and see the difference between you and the dream. And then you've got the liberation of transcendence. It's not such a far cry, and it's not so mystical. It's not the property of only realized souls. Be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is perfect. Because otherwise, you'll have to do a lot of work and come back and tell the world things like this. Kali, Kali Purashana, Kali, Kali Purashana, Para Para Dhyan, Namamrita Pan, Jadi Hate Tran, Take Vashana, Kali, Kali Purashana, Kali, Kali Purashana. O blissful self, caught in mundane diversions and vain pursuits, utter the sweet yet powerful name of Kali, 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 the Divine Mother of the infinite universe. Grasp the non-dual truth of her wisdom feet with the strength of your subtle insight, intelligence. Thus meditate deeply on her all-encompassing, all-pervasive presence. At that auspicious moment when the desire for liberation arises in you, imbibe the nectar of Kali's timeless awareness and taste immortality. Nice enough lyrics for your song? Better than come on baby, come on baby? See, somebody did some deep meditating and thinking on the perennial wisdom. So how can I put that in a way that people will really hear it? Put it into music, put it into a chant, and express it in a way, in a language they understand, that will make an impression upon their mind. An indelible impression. That's a nice expression. An indelible impression. Because most people have indelible impressions around money, fame, cars, you name it. That's their samskara, or their set of samskaras. Indelible impressions run into the mind stuff called samskaras. And nadis that better used for transcendence are being used for returning to earth to enjoy things that are unreal. So, I think we've taken everything on that chart except this. Yeah, we took that final chant as well, that final sloka. And in the time remaining, which is just about 25 minutes, I will take you through the rest of this chart. Basically, the only thing we haven't pointed out, because we've been revolving around the iceberg, is this sky of awareness and the sunlight of non-dual reality upon which the iceberg has its existence. So therefore you have this idea of the transcendent reality. What happens when you get the liberation of transcendence? Then you become a knower of Brahman, and you have nirvikalpa samadhi, nididhyasnam, lakshagunam, nirvikalpakam. After you've heard the truth, considered it rightly, put it in place, and nirvikalpa samadhi is supposed to be the result. That's the highest liberation one can attain. Complete non-duality, Advaita. That will become the future religion of all of humanity, Vivekananda said. Advaita will become the future religion of all humanity. The belief in non-duality that destroys and escapes all superstitions and all emotionalism and sentimentalism around religion and philosophy. Will become the living religion of however long it may take. Now, Hiranyagarbha is another word we can look at. There's the Mahat, the great mind. Sometimes you call that Hiranyagarbha. That was a very early term for the God's mind. It's called the cosmic egg. We're thinking of everything as a kind of egg, everything held inside it for potential. And Hiranyagarbha also has a connotation of a shining egg, something that shines with light that's inside of it, like a sun, Swayam Jyoti, shining by its own light. Moon doesn't do that. See, it borrows. But the sun has its own light, so it's self-luminous. And so that's the way you think about your Purusha as compared to Prakriti. Purusha is a sun that has its own light. Prakriti borrows from you its light, like a moon. Now, I've already chanted this, dive deep, O mind, dive deep into the ocean of God's beauty, which was that beautiful poem by Kubir. And we've talked about Ishvara's role, because we looked at the 6 powers and 6 treasures of Ishvara just now in the previous chart. So the only thing left here is this quote here, which is also a good addendum to this whole teaching, and actually a good conclusion to it too. It said, all that is perceived by the senses is finite. All that is beyond the senses is infinite. From the infinite the finite has come, yet being infinite, only infinite remains. Who can recite the Sanskrit to that? You probably know it. Om Purnamadam, Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnam Machachite, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. From the infinite the finite has come, yet being infinite, only infinite remains. So infinite trees, infinite rivers, infinite waters, infinite leaves, yet it's finite in nature. So where did that finitude come from? It came from the infinite soul, Purusha. So Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadachite, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. That word Purna means full, full, full. So when you start here at the liberation of wisdom, then you're saying, I'm ignorant. When you move here, you're saying there's a distinction between finite and infinite, and I need to find it out. When you arrive here, you have arrived at the infinite. You are that. Tat Tvamasi. That thou art. So that's sort of a sequence of liberation that happens in Kapil's way of thinking. And these 3 bondages, you might have noticed, are also very connected together. nature and the senses, well, sense objects and nature always have a love relationship with each other. They have a long-standing romance. But it's not as long-standing and as important as Purusha Prakriti. That's been a long-standing relationship too. And at one point, Purusha is going to say, I divorce you. I divorce you because I want to go back to my true nature, which is formless. There's not two of us here anymore. There can't be two sheriffs in one town, as they said in the old westerns, right? So I divorce you, form, name, time, space, suffering, karma. I'm taking my leave now, and I'm going into the state of absolute oneness, which is my true nature. Indivisibility. And the liberation of transcendence occurs. So all of these have a very deep connection with one another, and they cycle. That's on the individual level. That's our own problem, right? Our senses, the objects, and conventional life. But this also has a cycle to it that's on a cosmological level. This is individual principles, this is cosmological principles. We have to come to know them really clearly so that we can begin to liberate ourselves. The word liberation is not a very good one, by the way, because it means I was once bound. But the soul's never bound. Purusha is never bound. It's ever wise, ever free, and Shuddha Buddha Mukta. See, ever pure, ever wise, and ever free. Shuddha Buddha Mukta. That's what he said about it, Kapila. Purusha's ever free, never bound, as Vivekananda was to say it later. So finding that out is working your way beyond the personal, the interpersonal, to the interpersonal. That's beyond the individual to the collective, beyond the collective to the cosmic, and then beyond the cosmic to absolute reality, your true nature. Timeless, deathless awareness. And that would summate a kind of Samkhya-oriented second half of this class that we're having on Svetashvatara Upanisad. You can see how a later Upanishad borrowed pretty heavily from Samkhya too. Again, that sloka that we just took apart with two charts. The Lord of Maya projects the Vedas, sacrifices, spiritual practices, the phases of time, all religious observances, and all that the Vedas declare, and the whole world, including ourselves. It's a big sentence. All of that is projected by the great mind, God's mind. But as that happens, all become bound in Maya. Very few of the souls who can say, oh, look, it's just a chain of evolutes and a chain of involutes. I think I'll go out with it. Oops, I forgot that I'm supposed to go back. I'm just going to stay out. Case in point, you see, bondage to external things. Lifetimes of bondage. People who think in terms of bondage. Bondage is the norm. Have you ever heard the scientists talk about reality? With them, it's all relativity. Where's the mention of reality here? You're so good at, looking at opposites, then why aren't you admitting that there's an opposite to relativity too? Where there's a void, there has to be a fullness. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadachyate. Everything's full. Nothing's born, nothing dies. Get over it. And get over your fear and your doubts along with it. And be free. Vedanta's message echoed along hallways of time, through yoga, through Buddhism, through Tantra, through Samkhya, the eternal message of Mother India. I pay my obeisances to her and to all the great seers and sages that have come forth and disseminated that message to us all the way down to the present time. And through my own glorious teacher, Swami Seshananda Maharaj, and our founder here at SRV Lexics. And here on Ramakrishna's birthday, we salute them all. And here we will end with a Vedic chant to cap it all off. Om Sato, Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om